long before kings wore crowns, long before dragons crossed the sea, long before walls of stone and stories of heroes. There was winter, not a season, not a storm, but a darkness so vast and ancient it swallowed the sun itself. They called it the long night, a night that lasted years. Fields turned to frozen deserts, rivers to silent glass, and the sky, robbed of dawn, remained trapped beneath endless stars. Children were born having never seen daylight, never felt warmth, never known a world that wasn't winter. Fires burned night after night, not for comfort, but for survival. And from the farthest north, beyond forests of frozen bark and mountains drowned in ice, something ancient woke. Pale shapes walked upon the snow, tall, silent, crowned in frost, their eyes glowing cold blue like frozen moons. The others, they came not to conquer cities, for there were none. They came not to rule men, but to erase them. Villages vanished without sound. Armies shattered in silence, and the dead rose to fight for the cold. And so mankind, scattered tribes of first men, few in number, hungry, desperate, faced extinction. But in the deepest dark, legends say a single light remained. A hero walked alone through winter's teeth, seeking ancient power, answers hidden in forests older than men, and a sword forged to fight the cold. His name is lost to time. Some call him the last hero. Others whisper he was Azor Ahai, the warrior of flame. The truth is buried beneath snow and myth, but we remember the ending. A dawn that finally rose, a world dragged from the brink of eternal night, and a great wall of ice raised to hold back the dark. Tonight, we return to that age, to the first war, the first darkness, the first whispers of prophecy. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. The night is long, and the dawn has not yet come. Before the sky forgot the sun, before the ice claimed rivers and bone, the world was young, vibrant, alive with legends. They called this era the Age of Heroes, a time when men walked unafraid through ancient forests, and the first men ruled the land with bronze swords and sacred oaths. Villages grew beside rivers of silver. Herds moved across golden plains, and the winters, though harsh, always gave way to spring. In the north, beneath towering pines, House Stark traced its bloodline to Bran the Builder, the boy who spoke with giants and shaped stone with his will. Farther west, where green hills kissed the sea, mighty House Lannister was born from Lan the Clever, the trickster who stole a kingdom with wit instead of steel. In the frozen far reaches, Garth Greenhand blessed the earth, making crops thrive even in soil that should have been barren. These figures were more than names. They were legends, half men and half myth, their stories shaping the bloodlines of every king and lord to come. The world was not empty. It pulsed with ancient magic. In the forests, children of the forest whispered to leaves, their voices drifting through roots like echoes in dreams. They were small, delicate, brown-skinned, and timeless, wielding powers born from earth and starlight, warging, green-seeing, and songs that could bend nature itself. And for a time, humans and children lived in peace. Fires burned warm. Harvests were plentiful. The nights were short and the days long. No one believed the world could change. No one imagined that the wind itself could become a predator, that the sky could darken and refuse to brighten, that winter, instead of passing, could stay. Yet far in the endless north, beyond mountains men had never climbed, beyond forests untouched by fire, something stirred beneath ancient snow, something cold, something patient, something watching. The heroes of old did not know it yet, but their age was ending. The night was coming. It did not begin with war, not with screams, nor swords, nor the march of armies. It began with silence. First, the days shortened. Then the nights lingered a little longer, shadows stretching across the earth as though reluctant to leave. Farmers shrugged the early frost, believing winter had merely come sooner than usual. But when spring failed to bloom, when the ground remained hard and pale, when smoke rose from chimneys long into the months where flowers should have grown, fear began to stir. The first men traveled south, searching for sunlit skies, yet found only snow. The darkness was spreading. Forests that once echoed with birdsong fell silent. Deer vanished. Rivers froze from bank to bank. Wolves prowled closer to human fires, gaunt and desperate. And then, a strange rumor spread on the breath of wandering hunters. Shapes move beyond the frost. Men spoke of figures too pale to be human, gliding over the snow without leaving footprints. Of voices sharp as cracking ice. Of eyes glowing like cold stars. At first, no one believed. Legends belonged to fireside tales, to stories whispered to children frightened of the dark. But then, villages began to vanish. Entire settlements, gone without a trace. No bodies, no smoke, no tracks, just silence. The first men sent scouts north. Only one returned. His face blue with frost, his voice broken. "The dead walk," he whispered. "They rise, and they follow the pale shadows." Fires burned through the night. Camps huddled closer, steel drawn. Horses panicking at invisible shapes moving through the dark. Mothers clutched children. Warriors watched the tree lines. The world had not yet seen the others. Not fully, but it could feel them, like frost creeping along the spine of existence itself. The sun still rose, but a little dimmer, a little weaker, as though losing its strength against something vast and ancient. And far beyond mortal lands, beneath a sky of eternal winter, an army waited, not of men, but of ice, shadow, and hunger. The world was trembling, slowly, silently, and still, the worst had not yet begun. As the long winter deepened, the first men gathered their warriors, bronze shields wrapped in furs, axes sharp enough to split bone and bark. They marched north, not to conquer new lands, but to reclaim the ones already lost. The world before them looked like a graveyard of seasons. Forests encased in ice, lakes frozen solid, the sky choked with perpetual twilight. Fires sputtered against winds that felt older than mortal breath. Winds that whispered in a language not meant for men. When the first men reached abandoned villages, they found no blood, no tracks, no signs of struggle, only shattered doors and snow drifting through empty homes like wandering spirits. At night, they heard footsteps that did not belong to the living. The dead moved through the dark, silent as falling ash, eyes glowing faint blue like lanterns beneath the ice. Warriors braced for battle, shields raised, torches blazing, voices trembling with prayers never spoken before. The first contact was not a battle. It was a massacre. Swords struck bodies that felt like brittle glass, shattering, reforming, rising again. Arrows pierced flesh that did not bleed. And for every fallen warrior, another stood back up, fighting against his own brothers. Death no longer ended battles. It reinforced them. The first men retreated south, panic rippling through their ranks like wildfire through dry brush. They had faced storms, beasts, wars among themselves, but never an enemy who turned their own dead into an army. Around night fires, survivors whispered, "Steel cannot defeat the cold." Others claimed the pale shadows fought not like beasts, but like commanders, swift, deliberate, their blades of ice slicing through bronze as if cutting mist. And always, behind them, they felt a presence, watching, waiting, patient as winter itself. The first men had known enemies, wildlings, beasts, rival clans, but nothing like this. The war had begun, and already it was slipping beyond mortal control. They fought in bronze and blood. The enemy fought in silence and frost. The world's first great armies were falling one by one, and the night was only growing longer. As the sun dimmed to an eternal dusk, the dead no longer lingered in shadows. They marched. Villages fell one by one, their smoke rising like pale ghosts swallowed by the endless winter sky. The first men gathered their warriors into great camps of desperation. Thousands of shields, thousands of spears, fires burning day and night just to keep frostbite from taking their fingers. But even fire felt weaker now, as though the world itself was losing its warmth. At night, scouts returned breathless, voices shaking. They come in silence. Their steps make no sound. And soon, fear turned to horror. Warriors who died in battle rose again at sunset, not as men, but as whites, hollow shells of flesh and frost, eyes clouded, mouths frozen open in soundless screams. Their families watched them rise, watched husbands, sons, sisters turn against the living with empty faces and stiff, bone-cracking movements. The living no longer mourned their dead. They burned their bodies as quickly as possible, praying the flames would spare their souls. When a great host of the first men stood to confront the pale shadows on a frozen plain of shattered ice, they believed sheer numbers would turn the tide. But the others appeared like white smoke drifting through falling snow, silent, graceful, their armor shimmering like frost-bitten glass. They did not charge. They simply watched, cold and patient, as if time itself belonged to them. A warrior of the first men raised his bronze sword and rushed forward, screaming, only for his blade to shatter on impact, breaking into frozen shards that glittered in the air. The pale figure's sword, carved from living ice, slid through him without resistance. No sound, no effort, just cold. The others did not rage. They did not bleed. They fought like death itself, calm, inevitable. The living broke ranks. Fires were abandoned. Children carried through snow, while the screams of the dying echoed behind them. That night, the whites came crawling into camps from every direction, bodies dragging through frost, hands clawing at frozen wood, jaws snapping open and shut like broken puppets of winter. The first men had one choice: retreat further south or die beneath the cold. And so humanity fled, step by step, firelight shrinking, hope thinning. The world was closing in, the warm lands falling away, the night pressing forward like a tide of ice. And as the last defenses crumbled, stories began to spread. Not of armies, but of a single man walking into the heart of winter in search of power untouched by death. A man who would become the world's final hope, the last hero. When the armies of men failed, when fires dimmed and the cold marched ever south, hope no longer came from legions. It came from one man. History has forgotten his true name. Some call him the last hero. Others claim he was Azor Ahai, the first warrior of flame. The truth lies buried beneath layers of myth and memory. But all tales agree that when the world neared its end, a single man walked north into the heart of darkness. He did not seek war. He sought answers. Answers older than men, older than winter, older than the first whisper of magic. He carried a sword of bronze, a small pouch of dried meat, and a heart carved from stubborn hope. With him traveled a small band of companions, loyal friends, sworn brothers, fighters who believed that light could still return. They crossed forests frozen stiff as bone, rivers sealed beneath sheets of ice, valleys where even crows refused to fly. Weeks passed. Their torches flickered lower. Their horses collapsed from hunger. The wind became a blade of its own. One night, beneath a sky of endless stars, something moved within the snow. Pale shapes gliding silently across the drifts. The others had found them. The companions fought bravely, steel meeting ice, breath turning to crystal in the air. But one by one, they fell. Some died in battle. Others simply vanished into the frozen dark. When dawn, or what passed for dawn, finally arrived, the last hero stood alone. His food was gone. His horse was dead. His sword was broken. And in the silence that followed, he realized the truth. This was not a journey of men. It was a journey of magic. With frost clinging to his beard, hands cut and bleeding, breath shallow in the killing cold, he staggered forward, not toward the walls of men, but deeper into winter's domain. There, among ancient trees with white bark and red leaves stained like frozen tears, he found those older than mankind, the children of the forest. Their eyes shone like amber, reflecting a knowledge untouched by centuries. The last hero fell to his knees. "Help me. Help us. The world is dying." And the forests whispered in reply, leaves rustling like ancient prayers returning to life. The dawn of hope had begun. In the deep woods, where winter could not fully kill life, where roots twisted like ancient veins beneath the earth, the last hero stood before beings older than men, the children of the forest. They watched him with eyes of amber and gold, eyes that reflected centuries, eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations forgotten to history. They did not fear him. They pitied him, for they understood something that men did not. The long night was not a battle for land. It was a wound in the world itself. The last hero begged for aid, voice trembling with cold and desperation. The dead walk. My people are falling. Give us a way to fight. The children listened in silence, their small forms barely stirring among the roots. They knew the others well, too well. For some whispered that long ago, in ages even older than the age of heroes, the children themselves had birthed the White Walkers in a desperate war against mankind. Whether truth or myth, the knowledge haunted them. And so they agreed to help. Not out of love for men, but because even they feared a world swallowed forever by winter. Under a weirwood whose red leaves dripped like frozen blood, the children placed carved stones on the snow, patterns swirling with strange runes, symbols that pulsed faintly with ancient magic. They taught the last hero secrets: fire that could burn ice, obsidian that could cut through enchanted flesh, and words whispered in the old tongue that turned shadows into weapons. They placed dragon glass in his hands, black blades carved from death's mirror, smooth, silent, and impossibly sharp. "This will cut them," a child whispered, voice like wind through hollow bark. "But you will not win with blades alone." The last hero frowned. "Then how?" The child leaned closer, eyes glowing like embers beneath snow. "You must bind fire to your soul." Legends diverge here. Some say the children reforged his broken sword with magic older than metal. Others claim he forged Lightbringer himself, plunging steel into a living heart to awaken fire. But all stories agree on one truth: a weapon of flame was born. And with it, mankind no longer fled the night. They marched back toward it. The last hero rose to his feet, new strength burning through frozen veins, and vowed to bring dawn to a world that had forgotten light. Behind him, the children watched silently, unsure whether they had saved the world or unleashed a new destiny upon it. Armed with knowledge older than mankind, with dragon glass in his grip, and fire finally answering his call, the last hero returned to a world drowning in night. He did not return alone. The children of the forest walked beside him beneath ancient trees, small footsteps leaving light marks in the snow, cloaks woven from leaves that did not wither. Human warriors rejoined him, men who believed that hope, even fragile, was worth dying for. They came not as conquerors, but as the last defense against the cold. Ahead, across the frozen plains, the dead gathered. Tens of thousands of whites, moving as one body, hunched silhouettes against falling snow. Their eyes glowed faint blue, their hands stiff claws of frost, and behind them, watching with unreadable calm, the others, tall, elegant, their armor shimmering like crystal, their blades carved from ice so pure it seemed to breathe. The air around them froze, cracking like thin glass under footsteps. The first men formed a line, shields locked, torches lit, breath shaking in the wind. The last hero stepped forward, sword in hand, the blade glowing faintly like a coal refusing to die. He whispered, not to gods, but to the flame itself. "Burn." The sword erupted into fire, orange, white, molten, alive. The cry that followed echoed across mountains. For the dawn, the armies collided. Steel met ice, flame met frost. dragonglass shattered whites into frozen dust. Fire roared through corpses that could not scream. The children sang in the old tongue, voices rising like wind through stone, calling roots from beneath the snow, thorns bursting upward, binding the dead in walls of living wood. The others moved with eerie grace, cutting through mortal warriors like dancers through a slow waltz of death. But when one stepped forward to strike the last hero, blade shining white as moonlight, his flaming sword met it head on. Ice shrieked. Light burst. The others shattered into a storm of frost and snow. The battlefield froze into silence for a heartbeat. The dead themselves stunned as if they remembered fear. Then the tide shifted. With each frozen warrior falling, the darkness lost its grip. The pale army began to retreat, step by step, shadow by shadow, until the wind carried them back into the endless white. The first men did not cheer. They simply stared at the trembling horizon, knowing the battle was won. But winter itself still lingered. The dawn was coming. But sunrise is not a single moment. It is a war, fought inch by inch against the night. The battle was won. But victories against the cold are never final. The others had retreated, slipping back into the far north, where even legends dared not follow. But no one believed the darkness was gone. The first men stood among the bodies of friends, breath trembling, knowing winter was not defeated, only pushed back. And so came a question larger than any sword or spell. How do you stop the night from returning? The last hero gathered chieftains, warriors, and mystics around crackling fires, snow falling like ash from quiet skies. Some argued to hunt the others into the farthest reaches of the world. Others whispered of treaties, a fragile peace born from ancient mistakes. But one voice rose above the rest, calm, measured, carved from stone. We do not chase death. We hold it back. They began building a line, not of soldiers, but of stone, ice, and magic. A wall so vast it would divide the living from the frozen north forever. A barrier against gods, against shadows, against everything winter had become. Giants answered the call, massive figures dragging slabs of ice across frozen plains, their footsteps shaking the earth. The children of the forest wove spells into the foundations, their voices rising in eerie harmony, ancient magic binding frost to stone, sealing the wall with power unseen since creation. Men carved towers from blocks of winter, stacked layer upon layer, until the structure rose like a white spine across the world. Days became seasons. Seasons became years. And still, the wall rose. At last, beneath a fading twilight sky, the final stone was placed. The wall stretched nearly 300 miles, towering higher than any castle, gleaming with cold light as though carved from a single star. Some said it reached the heavens. Others said its shadows touched the edge of eternity. When the sun finally rose again, weak, pale, newborn, its first rays struck the wall and scattered like broken diamonds. The last hero stood before it, exhausted, scarred, yet alive. He placed his hand upon the frozen surface and whispered, "Let this stand as the line between night and dawn." Behind him, warriors laid down blades and took an oath, not to kings, not to glory, but to the realm itself. Their voices rose together. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. Thus, the Night's Watch was born, not as soldiers of conquest, but as guardians of a secret the world dared to forget. After years beneath a star-choked sky, after battles fought in shadows and frost, the world finally stirred. The long winter weakened, not all at once, but gently, like a dying breath losing strength. Snow that once stood unmoving began to thaw in thin rivulets of silver. Rivers cracked open, waters flowing sluggishly at first, then rushing with new life. The first men stepped from tents and fortifications, blinking like creatures waking from hibernation. Uncertain if warmth was real or just another dream, fires burned lower. Torches remained unlit. Men stood with hands to the sun, tears freezing at the corners of their eyes before melting again. Dawn had returned. Yet no celebration echoed across the realm. The world did not erupt in triumph. It exhaled. A long, tired, fragile sigh. For though the sun had risen, it rose over graves. Villages buried beneath snow. Families reduced to memory. Rivers filled with bones. Survivors planted their first seeds with trembling hands, unsure if spring would truly come. And somewhere beyond the wall, beyond wind-swept tundra and unmarked ice, pale figures watched from the far reaches of winter. They did not scream. They did not rage. They waited. The others retreated, not in defeat, but into exile. The children whispered that the cold would return when the world grew arrogant again, when thrones rose, when kings fought, when men forgot the cost of dawn, and prophecies spread across generations. A warrior of fire will return. A sword of light will wake again. The long night will fall once more. But for now, warmth returned to the earth. Babies were born beneath clear skies. Hunters roamed forests not filled with ghosts, and the wall stood tall, silent and eternal, guarding a truth the realm swore to ignore. The night had ended, but it had not died. It slept. When the dawn broke, when warmth returned to the soil, and snow retreated into the far corners of the world, the scars of winter did not fade. They were written in memory, in stories, in warnings carved into stone. The first men feared the cold's return, not out of superstition, but out of experience. And fear became prophecy. In sacred groves beneath red-leafed weirwoods, the children whispered visions of futures yet unseen. Shadows of ice creeping south again, flames rising to meet them, destinies forged in blood and sacrifice. They spoke of a warrior reborn, carrying a blade that burned with the soul of the sun. Humans knew him by many names: Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, the warrior of light. Different tongues, different myths, one truth. When the night returns, so will the flame. Priests of fire carried the story east across oceans and deserts, founding temples where flames never died. Their chants echoed across centuries. When the cold rises, a sword of fire shall rise against it. In the south, scholars locked scrolls containing fragmented accounts of the war. Dates lost, names obscured, battles half remembered. The age of heroes became myth. Myth became legend. Legend became bedtime tales told by old women beside flickering hearths. And in Winterfell, stonemasons carved the first foundations of ancestral crypts. Cold, quiet halls where the bloodlines of men who survived the night would rest beneath stone kings holding iron swords. Their statues did not honor triumph. They warned. The dead must stay dead. In taverns, minstrels sang softer verses. When stars bleed and shadows swell, the night returns and light must rise. The world healed. Empires rose and fell. Dragons would one day cross the sea. Kings would betray kings. And the wall would become a quiet border rather than a shield between life and death. The realm forgot, but the prophecies did not sleep. They waited, folded into ink and dream, for the moment winter reclaimed its voice, for the night always returns. And so does the dawn. The wall rose like the spine of a sleeping god, stretching across the world in a silent promise of protection. But a wall means nothing without those who stand upon it. After the long night, when the snow finally retreated and life returned to the earth, mankind did not disband its guardians. Instead, they formed an order. Not kings, not lords, not conquerors, but men who chose to stand between the living and the dead. They called themselves the Night's Watch. Their vows were simple, whispered beneath cold stars, sealed with breath that froze in the air. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. They swore to take no wives, bear no children, own no lands. They surrendered their futures so the realm might have one. At first, the watch was noble. Sons of great houses rode north with pride, wearing cloaks of black fur trimmed with silver clasps, their honor shining brighter than the torches along the wall. They trained beneath frozen battlements, patrolled ice fields at dusk, and watched the horizon where shadows once walked. They believed the others would return one day, and they intended to be ready. But decades passed, then centuries. Winters came and went like gentle whispers, never again rising to swallow the world. People forgot. The long night became story. Story became myth. Myth became legend. And legend became nothing more than the ramblings of old women beside fires on cold nights. Far away in the warm south, kings squabbled over crowns. Lords feuded for land and pride. And no one cared for a wall of ice at the edge of the world. The night's watch changed. Nobility stopped sending sons. Criminals were marched north in chains. Bastards, exiles, broken men. The forgotten were sent to defend the realm. Black cloaks faded to tattered rags. Swords grew dull. Towers fell silent, unmanned and empty. Only a few still believed. Old commanders who stood atop icy parapets at dawn, staring into the white horizon, whispering to themselves, "They will return." And in quiet moments, when the wind blew just right, carrying the taste of ancient frost, some swore they heard footsteps beyond the farthest trees. Not of men, not of beasts, but of something waiting. The wall did not forget. The night's watch did not forget. Only the realm did. As centuries passed, the world drifted further from the age of myth and moonlit forests. Magic, once woven through every root and river, drained slowly from the land. Not with a scream, but with a sigh. The children of the forest retreated deeper into forgotten groves, their numbers fading like stars at dawn. Where once 1,000 green seers whispered through weirwoods, now only a few ancient faces remained, carved in red and white bark, watching centuries pass in silence. The first men abandoned the old gods, or mixed their worship with new faiths. Septs rose where groves once stood, cathedrals where sacred stones once slept, priests replacing singers of earth and leaf. Kings ruled not through magic, but through gold, steel, and armies. Lore became superstition. Dragonglass was forgotten in caverns. Ancient runes were buried beneath moss. Weirwood roots tangled around memories no one alive could interpret. And the others, driven into exile beyond the ghost forests, became nothing more than stories whispered to children. If you wander north at night, pale shadows will take you. Mothers spoke the tales to frighten sons into obedience. Maesters laughed, dismissing them as myth. Only the old, shepherds who watched the moon, wanderers who slept beneath cold stars, whispered that something ancient still stirred beyond the edge of maps. And sometimes, in winters harsher than memory, a raven with blue-tinged feathers would land upon a broken fence and stare too long, as if remembering a world of ice. The night's watch dwindled. From 10,000 sworn brothers to a few hundred tired souls, stationed across empty castles that once housed thousands. The great forts, Deep Lake, Queensgate, Greyguard, collapsed into ghostly ruins. Only a handful remained manned. Castle Black, Eastwatch by the Sea, the Shadow Tower, islands of flame in a sea of forgotten cold. Commanders wrote urgent pleas for men and supplies to kings who no longer cared. And in their loneliness, they spoke the ancient oath not as tradition, but as prayer. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the wall. The world below celebrated tournaments, marriages, wars of ambition. The world above watched, silent and patient. Magic was fading. Winter was sleeping. But both were not gone. Time, for mortals, is a river. But for ancient things, things born before memory, time is a circle. Centuries after the long night faded into legend, the world below the wall thrived. Kings rose and fell. Dynasties were born and burned. Dragons crossed the sea, and the realm once again drowned in wars of pride. But the North remained quiet, watching. Then, slowly, signs began to return. First, the seasons shifted. Winters grew longer, sharper, lingering like unwanted ghosts. Snow fell deeper across the gift. Woods that once sang with wolves became silent, as if every creature held its breath. Rangers of the night's watch vanished in the frost. Entire patrols swallowed by forests without leaving footprints behind. Tracks of strange creatures were found along frozen rivers. Footprints that did not match man nor beast. And beside them, corpses of animals frozen solid, eyes wide, limbs stiff as glass. Ravens stopped returning. Snowstorms rolled south faster than clouds could form. Torches along the wall sputtered against winds that felt colder than mere weather. Commanders called it coincidence. Maesters called it climate. But the old ones, the few who remembered stories passed down through blood and tale, whispered ancient words once more. The night is waking. Beyond the wall, wildlings told tales around frozen fires, of villages swallowed by frost, of shapes gliding across snow without sound, of corpses rising with empty blue eyes. They fled south, not for conquest, but for survival. The Watch dismissed their warnings as panic and myth. Until one night, beneath a moon drowned in mist, a ranger returned to the wall, pale, shaking, eyes wide with terror. He spoke only one sentence before collapsing onto the ice. "They're back." The wind howled across the battlements, carrying a chill that felt familiar. Ancient, patient, inevitable. The long night had not been defeated, only delayed. While whispers of winter echoed beyond the wall, the world to the south lived as though nothing had changed. In golden halls of lords and kings, men drank, sang, and fought over crowns. Battles of pride and power, never once looking beyond their own borders. Winter, to them, was merely a season, not a warning, not a prophecy, not a memory of near extinction. In King's Landing, merchants counted coins, nobles plotted alliances, and maesters wrote history with cold ink, stripping magic from every tale until myth became footnote. The long night? A superstition. Dragonglass? Useless rock. The others? Folktales. The realm had forgotten, because forgetting was easier than believing the world could fall again. But in the north, memory lingered. In stone halls beneath Winterfell, ancient kings lay carved in cold silence, their iron swords resting across their laps. Not symbols of rulership, but weapons placed to keep their spirits from rising, should winter claim them. The Starks did not laugh at old stories. They lived by them. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, the saying went. A reminder, not of duty alone, but of watchfulness. For the North remembered what the South chose to forget. The greatest enemy is not a rival house. It is the cold that walks in silence. Ravens flew to court after court, begging for supplies, men, steel. But southern kings offered little more than polite dismissal. Why fear ghosts when there are thrones to fight for? And so the world drifted further from the truth hidden in its bones. The North prepared alone, torches burning along the battlements, eyes fixed on the white horizon. The wall stood, patient and eternal, a monument not to victory, but to warning. For though spring returned and life bloomed across the realm, the cold beyond the trees was not defeated. It was waiting. Time had lulled men into comfort. But time means nothing to winter. The long night ended. The sun rose. Life returned. But history does not vanish simply because people stop telling it. The battle against the darkness left marks across the world, not in songs or scrolls, but in the very shape of kingdoms. The wall stood as the greatest reminder, a monument carved from ice and magic, stretching across the frozen north like a scar across the earth. The Night's Watch guarded its shadows, first with armies of thousands, later with ragged remnants of forgotten men, but always with purpose. In Winterfell, stone kings rested in their crypts, swords laid across their laps, not to honor their reign, but to bind their spirits should death ever try to claim them again. In distant temples of fire to the east, red priests whispered prophecies of a warrior reborn, of a sword of flame rising once more when shadows lengthen and stars bleed. In the wild lands beyond the wall, tribes carried tales older than written language, stories of pale figures stalking the frozen night, waiting for the world to grow careless. And through the ages, something lingered in the far north, silent, watching, patient as the grave. For winter is not merely weather. It is a force, a memory, a promise. The realm below feasted and fought. Kings rose and fell. dragons burned and died. Yet, above them all, the wall remained, cold and unmoving, holding back a truth the realm had forgotten. The night does not die. It waits. And if history teaches anything, it is this. The dawn only exists because the darkness once tried to erase it. The long night was not just a war. It was the beginning of a prophecy, echoed across millennia. And when winter rises again, not as season, but as enemy, the world will need fire once more. Until then, the wall stands, watching, waiting, guarding a secret that most have chosen to forget. The story of the long night is not only a memory of what happened, it is a warning of what can return. Humanity survived not through strength, but through unity. Men and magic, fire and forest, hope and sacrifice. A wall was raised, vows were sworn, and the world moved forward, believing itself safe. But winter is patient. It waits beyond the edges of maps, beyond the warmth of kingdoms, beyond the noise of thrones. The watch continues its silent vigil, torches flickering along ancient battlements, holdfasts crumbling beneath forgotten snow. And in the quiet north, deeper than memory, something stirs among frozen shadows, not yet awake, but dreaming of cold skies. Remember the long night, not as legend, but as truth carved in ice. For if history teaches anything, it is this: the night will return. And when it does, so must the dawn. Sleep now, wanderer. Rest beneath warm blankets, safe in a world reborn by light. And may the fires of old guard your dreams until morning comes again.